Thank you, General Scaparrotti. It's an excellent statement. I think we all look at Russia now, and with the new strategy that we have, we include both China and Russia as the threats. Of course, in your AOR, it's primarily Russia, and we've seen advancements. There was a RAND report that came out yesterday. There are three things in the RAND report that I want to refer to. One was in 2016, Russia spent 5.3% of its GDP on the military. It's important as we look at some of what we're expecting from our NATO partners to recognize this. Second thing that was in that report, Russia has the ability to defeat a NATO ally and present NATO with a strategic and operational challenge, specifically that Russian forces could reach the capitals of Estonia and Latvia in 60 hours. And third, they say Russia has approximately 32,000 troops in the Baltics region compared to 78,000 for Russia, and the NATO is outnumbered 757, that's Russia, to 129 NATO in tanks in the AOR. In addition to the RAND report that came out, the Army Times article this morning it says the Army plans on repositioning two fully modernized armored brigade sets of equipment in Belgium and Netherlands, and as you said in your opening statement, in addition to one, rotational armored brigade combat team. So to set this hearing off, let me ask you a series of five. These should be yes or no questions. However, there's no such thing as a yes or no question in Washington. First, the National Security Advisor, General McMaster, stated that U.S. ground forces are, quote, this is his quote now, outranged, outgunned, and overmatched by Russian ground forces. Do you agree with that?
Chairman, if you look at it in a concentrated way on the border of Eastern Europe, and only on the ground force, I would agree with that statement.
All right.
We fight multi-domain, however.
I understand that. The RAND report paints a pretty bleak picture and warns that NATO could be overwhelmed by superior Russian firepower in a war in Eastern Europe. Do you agree with that statement?
Chairman, would you state that again, please?
Yes. The statement that was in the report says that NATO could be overwhelmed by superior Russian firepower in a war in Eastern Europe.
Chairman, I don't agree with that. When you look at NATO writ large, it has the strength of 29 nations. The effort that's being made in NATO and the one that's being made here in the United States is to increase our capability to deter and, if necessary, defend. Okay,
that's a good statement. And I'm not asking you to agree with this, but I am concerned when we have so many reports coming out that it's important for the American people to understand the threats that we do face, not just here, but in China also. And then the third thing is, do we have adequate U.S. forces postured throughout Europe to meet the challenge? I think you've already answered that. And it says, and then Russia has developed a ground-launched cruise missile in violation of the INF Treaty. Do you agree with that? I'm sure you do. And lastly, like we saw in 2 weeks ago in China, and what they're doing in the South China Sea, and as I said in my opening statement, this is not something that is in your AOR, but as we have to meet those challenges, and this was a much greater challenge than I thought it was before I was over there 2 weeks ago, it still draw resources from you and from your AOR, so it's someone you have to be very, very sensitive to. So I'd say, how does UCOM partner with, on the cybersecurity side, with the Cyber Command to prevent and mitigate threats? That's in cyber threats now. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, Chairman. First of all, in terms of the cyber world, it's interesting because we each have cyber centers. We each have teams committed through Cybercom to us. Mm-hmm. But cyber doesn't have boundaries like we do between I and General Waldhauser on the ground. So I think it's pretty fluid, and Cybercom is the one that helps us shift resources that might need to be shifted, and certainly we share very closely with them any intelligence that we have, et cetera, that affects their AOR. So I think there's a close relationship.
Yeah, well, this is the new threat. This is something that the general public is not very familiar with. One last thing I'd want to just you get on the record. We have this requirement in NATO for a 2% requirement, and as it is right now, in 2018, the Secretary General estimates 8 of 29 NATO allies will meet this, and then it'll get up to 15 allies by the end of 2024. Now, recently, there have been a lot of these countries complaining about this, and are you concerned that some of the European officials criticize the 2% requirement as arbitrary and unrealistic?
Chairman, I'm concerned. They need to invest in defense. We've discussed the complexity of this environment, and particularly in Europe. And of course, we strongly encourage them to meet that 2%, but also the 20% requirement in modernization focused at specific capabilities that are relevant to the environment we're in.
Yeah, that was one of the first things when President Trump took office that he examined was the burden sharing of NATO, and I agree with that too. Senator Reid.